Let me just say that we're trying to clean up our mailing list and our database. So I just want to ask our friends and our fans out there if you could just help us quickly to be a friend, be a partner, and go to discover.org.au/subscribe. We have a lot of you on email. We have some of you by your phone number and then by other data. And it's all kind of, needs to be cleaned up. So even if you've done it before, you're not going to get duplicated. If you use the same email, please just go to subscribe and put your name, your phone number, and your email there. Because we're going to start communicating by emails. We're going to start communicating by SMS, depending on where you are. So we want to talk more and more and establish a communication, a dialogue with you. All right, now we've got to cover something that's really important. Someone has recently passed away that you might have heard about. Now, how many of you here know who Norma McCorvey is? Raise your hand. Norma McCorvey. I've got very few hands here. Norma McCorvey. Okay, what if I were to tell you Jane Roe? How many of you know Jane Roe in Roe v. Wade? All right, now we got a lot more hands. Okay, and you can see Gloria Allred, always a bit of a legal opportunist, always there at controversial cases. And she was at the center of a 1973 Supreme Court case in the United States of America that basically legalized abortion up to the third term. And this was really a catastrophic, immoral legal decision, but that's what governments can do. They can legalize sin. They can legalize things that God the Father would absolutely disagree with. So we need to pray for our government. It's very important for us to understand this case right now because I believe God has given us an opportunity for revival. I believe 2017, the year of Jubilee, is the year to spark revival, and it can continue until Jesus comes back. We don't know how long that is, but God is very merciful, and I believe He's giving many people a second chance, including the government, including the people who are corrupt and being found through all these WikiLeaks and email leaks. They're found to be corrupt. All right? So God is giving you, if you're a corrupt leader, a second chance to turn to Jesus. We're not just preaching to the citizens and the voters. We're preaching to the top levels of government. Turn, give your life to Jesus because you have a high call. A government official, a politician is supposed to be an agent of God. And one day you'll stand in front of God and He will hold you to account. How did you represent Him in the political realm? Norma McCorvey was born in 1947, and she recently died on the 18th of February, 2017, not quite completing 70 years. She died at 69 years of age. The moment I saw that, I thought, wow, this lady is prophetic in every way. 1947 was the year that the UN Resolution 181 declared that Israel could be a state. It was prophetic in many ways. I've taught on this many times before. Then you go to 1967. It was prophetic for Israel again. Jerusalem was captured. But it was also prophetic in the area of pro-life or pro-abortion debate. It was in that year that the American Medical Association fudged the definition of life. And they were talking about viability. And viability, whether a baby can survive outside the womb, that obviously is not a very good definition of what life is, because as medical science changes, as science gets better, guess what? Viability becomes earlier and earlier. It's got nothing to do with reality. It's just our, primitive science compared to God. God says, the moment you're conceived, you are life. We've taught on that before, but let's just continue. So, in 1973, she was used in a landmark case that legalized abortion in the United States, and then that had ramifications for all of the Western world. Australia, where I live, Victoria, we have the worst abortion law. It needs to be repealed. It is sanctioning the murder of our own citizens. And you know why we murder our citizens when they're babies? You know why we can do that legally? Because babies can't vote. And in our democracy, politicians want something more than money. They want votes. They can't get the votes from the babies, so they're dispensable. But not to God. Babies are not dispensable to God. Every baby is unique, is important, and has a plan for their lives. God has a plan. Let me tell you a bit about who was Norma McCorvey. In 1969, when she was 21, she was unmarried, unemployed, and pregnant with her third daughter. She had actually already been married and divorced by that age. She had given her other two daughters up for adoption. Number two, she made one trip to an illegal abortion clinic in Dallas. Abortion was not possible because Texas allowed abortion only if the mother's life is in danger. She said later on that she would not have had the abortion anyway because she was far too long into her pregnancy. She asked her doctor to put her in touch with an adoption lawyer. She wanted to give her baby to a foster parent, and so you need a lawyer to do that. That lawyer put her in touch with two pro-abortion lawyers named Sarah Weddington and Linda Coffey, who were looking for a vulnerable pregnant woman who would sign their affidavit for a monumental legal case. They wanted to push this through, and they wanted to be famous for doing it. She agreed to be the leading plaintiff for Roe v. Wade for free beer and pizza. Young lady didn't know what she was doing. Her case went to the Supreme Court, where in a landmark decision of 7-2, the court legalized abortion up to the third trimester. Norma won, even though she was not seeking abortion and had already given birth to a healthy baby daughter who was immediately adopted. Quote, she said, "I found out about Roe v. Wade just like everyone else did. I read it in the newspaper." You'll never hear this from fake news, corrupt news network, CNN, BBC, Washington Post, New York Times. You're never going to hear about any of these things because they have propaganda to push on you. You know, when a tyrant has something to push on you, they get their propaganda machine working. Well, these guys are really just tools. They're like lapdogs for leftist ideology. So you really have to be careful about the media, and this is what we're trying to tell you is Jesus says in the last days there will be such great deception that even the elect, some of the elect, will be deceived. So you take an issue that is so cut and dry, it's so absolutely crystal clear in the Bible, thou shalt not murder. And murdering kids is the worst thing. It happened under Pharaoh, it happened under Herod. These were the extreme villains of the Bible. There's no question at all that killing baby is a great, great sin. But they try to muddy the waters. They do, you know, what we've been saying for a long time now, that we have in the end times the same choice that Adam and Eve had in the Garden of Eden. You either choose the tree of life or you choose the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And you'll find that those who are going the wrong way, they always choose more knowledge, whereas God is saying choose more life. That's the decision. It's not really that hard. Every decision that you make, you ask yourself, will my decision result in more life or less life? It's not about seeking more knowledge and trying to define at what stage the fetus is viable. That's what they call the baby. So the truth about Roe v. Wade, let me tell you. Number one, Norma McCorvey never had an abortion. Number two, Norma lied about being gang raped, and she admitted that. According to Norma, the lawyers thought that she was the ideal case. Quote, "You're white, you're young, pregnant, and you want an abortion." At that time, I didn't know their full intent, only that they wanted to make abortion legal, and they thought I'd be a good plaintiff. I came for food, and they led me to believe that they could help me get an abortion. During our meeting, they questioned me, "Norma, don't you think that abortion should be legal?" Norma actually said that she did not know the definition of abortion. She thought it meant going back to not being pregnant, as in abort a mission. That was her understanding. The lawyers thought that her claim of rape would make her case stronger and the judges more sympathetic. She met the lawyers 3 to 4 times signed the affidavit that brought Roe v. Wade into being on March 17, 1970. The courts, since the time of Pilate executing Jesus until now, have been the culprit of some of the most immoral sins in our society. She never attended any court hearing. Have you ever heard that from the mainstream media? During a 2006 interview with Dr. Brad Herrub, PhD, the doctor was surprised that when he asked, "Did you ever attend courtroom sessions?" her response stunned me. She quickly replied, "No, never." After this, she worked for several abortion clinics. Quote, "The abortionist I work for, he's a very greedy man, a selfish man. I don't think there's a good reason for an abortion, but Dr. Jasper made me really realize that it was just a racket. He was just doing it for the money. He didn't care about the women." And you'll find this about third-wave feminism. They don't care about the women. They're actually using women for their agenda. In the 1980s, Norma confessed to lying about being raped. In 1995, she became a born-again Christian and a pro-life activist. Now, how many of you have heard that? Never. I got many heads shaking here in this sanctuary. She also ended a relationship with a lesbian partner. She really transformed through the power of Jesus Christ. She committed her life to serving the Lord and helping women save babies. What do you want? More life or less life? Norma regretted her case being used to legalize abortion. Again, I quote, "Although I was an emotionally abused child and a sexually abused teenager." Come on, some of you know this. Doesn't get worse than that, does it? Well, listen to her words. "I believe the worst abuse was inflicted by the judicial system. And people in authority pass immoral decisions that cause immoral action. It's even worse in her mind than being sexually abused as a teenager. In retrospect, I was exploited by two self-interested attorneys. Worse, the courts, without looking into my true circumstances, and they usually don't, and taking the time to decide the real impact abortion would have upon women, I feel used me to justify legalization of terminating of the lives of over 35 million babies. And at that time it was 35 million, now it's over 55 million babies. Norma felt incredible guilt. In a 2003 interview, she said, "I long for the day that justice will be done." What government do we have if they don't give us justice? Right? What legitimacy does any government in the world have if they are not agents of justice? We're going to preach this and talk about this more and more, that Christianity is far more than getting saved. It is far more than getting saved and then watching sermons on YouTube. And I thank you for following me on YouTube. That's great. But it's more than that. It's more than saying, "Jesus took away my sins and I'm waiting to die and go to heaven." You're meant to do something significant here on this earth. What do we mean by significant? We all say that. You're significant. You're special. What do we mean? You're to transform the culture, top to bottom. That's how Christianity has been preached up until recently, up until our century. What a shame. And we're going to try to recapture that. Here in this ministry, in this church, we're not going to let you just sit around. And that's uncomfortable. Some people won't like it. You will find other churches where you'll be comfortable. But here, we want you to be a culture changer. Amen. This culture is so corrupt. It's so corroding. Right? When the most powerful people we elect sanction the murder of babies and pass unjust court decisions that hurt people, hurt citizens, something has to change. And in America, it's changing. Good for you, Americans. Good for you that you bucked the system, you didn't listen to the mainstream media, and now it's changing. Trump's already stopped the funding of NGOs that promote abortion overseas. And that saves $600 million. Isn't that good? $600 million could build a few highways, couldn't it? More than a few highways. We would fix a lot of things in Melbourne with $600 million. Well, he stopped it. First week in office. Is that good or what? Wonderful. Thank you, sister. So things are changing. That means change is in the air. Revival is coming. But we've got to pick it up and we've got to preach it. And from the pulpits, the fire of the gospel has to go out. It's not a gospel of merely getting saved. You've got to clean up your life. You've got to walk with God. You've got to hear God. Why? You can't just sit and listen to YouTube. Why? Because God has a call for your life, and time is finite. Your life is finite. So every day you wake up and you ought to praise God and pray, Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done. Lord, use me. What do you want me to do? Offer yourself to God, and then you got to get busy. Shake off the spirit of lethargy and laziness. Don't waste time. Don't burn. You know, what did my father say? You're burning daylight. You're burning daylight. My father say, get up, go to work, do stuff. I'm talking about when I was 13. Yeah? And now we still have 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds doing nothing. No. God is calling us to a great purpose. So she said, I long for the day that justice will be done and the burden from all these debts will be removed from my shoulders. I want to do everything in my power to help women and their children. Is that a feminist? That's a real feminist, isn't it? I want to do everything in my power to help women and their children. And she would be branded like a demon by the feminists. What an oxymoron. What a contradiction. Well, she put action to those words. In 2004, Norma filed a federal lawsuit pleading that Roe v. Wade be overturned. Known as McCorvey versus Hill, the case was rejected by the United States Appeals Fifth Circuit, calling it moot. I'm going to teach you this word, moot. And McCorvey was barred from further litigation, meaning not only does she disagree with her winning case, God has touched her. And she realizes the so-called victory she got in court is anti-Christ. It's anti-Jesus' will. So she repents and says, I want to go back and undo this. And they say, we will not give you any more opportunity to present the evidence that you have. And now that she died, guess what? They have really, truly won, because there's no way you can, exhume her and bring her back into court. But she's left us some evidence. Judge Edith Jones stated that it was ironic that the doctrine of mootness, which confines the judicial branch to actual cases and controversies, barred her from further litigation. Roe v. Wade, after all, was the first and foremost exception to mootness, since McCorvey's baby was born by the time that the Supreme Court sat and had to make a decision, and there was no case and no controversy in McCorvey's life. It was a moot case. And yet, in an exception to bulldoze a irrational left-wing agenda, they made an exception to mootness. Then when she tried to appeal, they said, your case is moot. This is what you'll find with the left. Again and again, I call them the irrational left. The dissenting Supreme Court Justice Byron White called Roe v. Wade an exercise in raw judicial power. See, they're not supposed to have that power. That's reserved for the legislative branch, reserved for the executive branch, but it was an overstep, an overreach of their trusted power. Quote, even more ironic, Judge Jones wrote, was evidence McCorvey offered that could have generated an important debate over factual premises that underlay Roe. She referred to 1,000 affidavits of women who have had abortions and claim to have suffered long-term emotional damage and impaired relationships. Isn't it a feminist thing to prevent emotional damage and impaired relationships in women? Wouldn't that be a women's health issue? But they deny that. They're deniers. They're female deniers. Female emotion deniers. Female relationship deniers. Judge Jones said she could not conceive of any judicial forum in which McCorvey's evidence could be aired. So they successfully passed it, and then they said, no further debate. Have you ever heard that from the left before? Climate change. No further debate. That's all they say. They don't argue the evidence. They don't make a rational, appealing case to the public. In Australia, we're facing that, where they promised us that we would have a referendum if they want to change the definition of marriage. And then what does the left say? Our Labour Party, the Greens, what do they say? No referendum needed. We do not want the people to have a voice and decide on this. And that is a violation of biblical principles of government. This is why Christians need to realize salvation is more, the gospel is more than salvation. There's so much about good government in the Bible, isn't there? I mean, there's a book called Judges. There are 2 books called Kings. Many books, Psalms, Proverbs, written by politicians. The Bible has so much to say about nations and good government. And yet we continue to soften the message. We think it's appealing. We think it's offensive if we say, this is what God says about good politicians versus evil politicians. So we say nothing from the pulpit. If people say, a lot of times it's true, the churches, have people come and go and leave. They don't like it, but a lot of people are waking up to it. God is touching hearts, and God is calling certain people together. And we've got to band together. If Jesus is not coming back, if He doesn't come back, very soon, then we are given grace to transform our culture. And God has done it before. He can take any heathen culture, any pagan culture, any antichrist culture, and turn it into Christian. Can happen. So that's what we want to see. So there's no more forum for the evidence, nor could the representative arms of government debate it. Our nation, Judge Jones warned, had been left in a position of willful blindness. This was a perverse result of Roe v. Wade. The irrational left, also I will give you a term for them, they're cultural Marxists. See, everybody knows communists are bad. These are cultural communists. They want to force their secular, atheistic agenda on the population. That's what communists do. Communists are responsible for the most deaths in the world, not religion. Most Aussies don't know that. Aussies say this phrase all the time. Oh, religion causes all wars. No, it doesn't. Atheism, communism have caused more wars and more deaths, and there are even legal deaths. Legal executions, legal murders. I've got someone from Russia nodding here, saying yes. You study a little bit of Russian history, you will know. Stalin and Lenin taking Marxist ideology, secular atheist ideology, and killed people. 40 million people is the minimum. 40 million, minimum. It could be higher. It could be 50, 60 because the ramifications of the poverty and the famines and the imprisonment and the labor camps. This is not from Christians, not from religion. So again, Australians have been misled. They've not been presented the correct historical evidence. The irrational left, the communists, use women, then silence them and even demonize them when they dare to dissent. One of the phrases that the communists used to promote their ideology was to say that women could never be equal without communism. See, they always use these terms. Nothing new under the sun. But these communists have rebranded themselves. They're cultural communists. So Jane Roe became an opponent of abortion and of the legal case that bears her name, Roe v. Wade. And I can say to you, she is in heaven. In 2017, the year of Jubilee, she has gone on to be with her Lord, Jesus Christ. I believe that this is a prophetic thing. The year of Jubilee means the year of freedom. It's the 70th anniversary for Israel. It's the 50th anniversary